Hi, welcome to another podcast. I'm Lorna Slater, co-leader of the Scottish Green Party.
And my name's Mags Hall. I'm the general election candidate for Dunfermline and West Fife, and I'm also co-convener of the Scottish Green Party Council.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So the Green Party, Scottish Green Party, used to have our two sort of main leadership roles were called co-conveners. And people are very kind when they meet me. They often refer to me as co-convener because that was previously the role. And I'm co-leader. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm co-leader of the Scottish Green Party with Patrick Harvey, and you are
co-convener of council. So the previous co-conveners, our two previous co-conveners of the party were technically also co-conveners of council, but the way the party was structured before was that council was responsible for absolutely everything. Therefore, the co-conveners of council were the default party leaders. You know, they chaired our council meetings, they oversaw all the operations of the party, and they were the public-facing spokespeople as well. So it's become increasingly clear in recent years that wasn't a viable role anymore. None of our people in that position, nobody really humanly could do all those jobs, and you wouldn't want the same person to do all those jobs as well, because doing the operational side of things, supporting branch development, supporting the growth of the party, and also being the public face of the party are very different skills. So following the structural review that we had and the new constitution that the party brought in spring this year, we divided that out into, it's basically, was three different roles, but all of them are co-roles. So we have at least one female representative in each of those roles. There's co-conveners of council, there's co-chairs of the National Executive, and then there's the co-leader role that you and Patrick are doing at the moment.
And all these roles are volunteer roles. All of us do these in addition to our day jobs and our caring responsibilities and our dishwasher loading and our hanging up our laundry and all the other things that we all have to do. So it certainly wasn't viable as the party grew. We're an organisation of nearly 7,000 people, and it wasn't viable to be a convener of an organisation that large, as well as spokesperson, as well as those other things. So the new party structure, we changed those roles out. We broke them into much more hopefully manageable pieces for volunteers to take on. And this will hopefully allow us to continue to grow as a party, because we had massive growth after 2014, what we called the surge, the great big green surge. And I think what we're finding in a lot of cases now is that the surge members, and I was a surge member, are sort of have worked their way into this party structure, and I think several of our national committees are now led by surgers. So that's an exciting kind of new blood in the party, new energy.
It is, and it's kind of, I feel anyway, that dividing the roles up has given much more clarity, not just to the individuals in the leadership roles, but to the bodies themselves. So as council now, so council is the body that represents the grassroots membership, and council is made up of representatives from all our branches, as well as our representative groups. So our Women's Network, our Disabled Greens, our Rainbow Greens. And it's there to be the overarching strategic guiding body for the party, to make sure that our strategy and our aims and our ambitions as a party is still led by the grassroots. But it's also there to support that grassroots and to nurture them. So to make sure that branches have the resources that they need, to make sure they're getting the support that they're needed, to make sure that branches are being asked, what they're being asked to do is a reasonable thing and isn't beyond their capabilities as well. So that's what we're really now able to focus on. The executive, led by our executive co-chairs, is dealing with all the operational side of things. So the day-to-day management of the party, our staffing, the delivery of our strategy. Once council set the strategy, the executive makes sure that gets delivered. So it's really divided those roles out a bit. We've only had, since bringing the new structure in, we've just had the one meeting of council. Council meets 4 times a year. So we had our meeting in September, which we got really positive feedback on. It was a shorter meeting, it was a different structure, it was a different style. We got good feedback so far. Our next one's in December. We're really open to hearing from branches and hearing from members about what they need council to be, so that it can be a useful forum for people going forward, and to make sure, as I say, that the members in the grassroots are still at the core of what the party's doing.
And I think that's so important for how we organize ourselves. It's something we get frustrated about when people on Twitter and in the media sort of say, why don't Lorna Slater and Patrick Harvey make the Greens do X? And it's like, well, that's not how it works. Me and Patrick work for the party.
Yeah.
Mags is in theory in a much more powerful position in the party by chairing or convening council, which is the grassroots member-led party strategy and decision-making body. The way it works is that council tell Patrick and me what to do, not the other way around. So as spokespeople for the party, that's Patrick's and my job is to do our best to represent the views and values of the Green Party to the wider world in the media. Although during an election, all candidates also become spokespeople.
Yes. So I'm an election candidate as well, which has been pretty exciting. It's the first time I've stood in a general election. I was a candidate at the European elections earlier this year, and I've stood at council elections. But yeah, it's interesting to be doing a general election in my home constituency, which I'm very proud to represent and to talk about local issues. A lot of it so far has been about trying to get people excited about the election and make people aware that this election's happening. There's a lot of political apathy round about my area in Dunfermline and West Fife. A lot of people who are doing all right for themselves, they could just ticking over nicely and not too concerned. So that's been a big focus of the campaign so far.
Now, your particular expertise is in food and farming, which is interesting to me because I always joke that I'm a city mouse. I grew up in a big city. I live in the centre of Edinburgh. Like if you threw a dart at Edinburgh and you'd probably hit my flat if you hit the middle. So I don't know much about food and farming at all. And I know our colleague Carolyn Grimgior made a wonderful speech at a hustings this week, and she was talking about the climate emergency and about how tackling the climate emergency means we need to change how we get our food. What does that actually mean? Okay,
it's a big question. So the first thing to be aware of is that agriculture and food production is a huge contributor to global warming. In Scotland, it's the second biggest sector. When we produce under the climate change bill, the Scottish Government produces a report every year showing our emissions and showing it quite clearly. And for consistently several years in a row now, agriculture has been the second biggest emitter after transport. So it's huge. It is quite a complex subject though, because it's not quite, emissions from agriculture aren't the same as emissions from the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry is digging up ancient energy, it's ancient carbon that's been stored underground for millennia, digging that up and burning it and releasing it into the atmosphere, which is an absolutely massive shift and a massive knock to our ecosystem. The emissions that we get from agriculture, there's a small proportion of it that is fossil fuels emissions. So there's fossil fuels that we use in our farms, there's tractors going around, there's fossil fuels that we use in the production of fertilisers, we use fossil fuels in the transportation of our food and the refrigeration of our food. So a chunk of it is emissions from fossil fuels, and we need to tackle them in the same way that we tackle other emissions by reducing it and coming up with alternatives to fossil fuels. But the other big chunk of emissions, which you hear about a lot from food and climate change activists, is the emissions from both animal agriculture and arable agriculture. And these are emissions caused by biological processes in rearing animals, in digging up our soil and in growing food. And these are emissions that are produced naturally. The problem that we have at the moment is that we're producing food on such an intense industrial scale that these emissions are building up in the atmosphere quicker than we can sequester them. So in a sort of traditional sustainable farming system, cows and goats and sheep produce methane from their natural biological processes. Methane is, I think it's 4 times stronger than CO2. Methane has a really, really significant greenhouse gas impact, but it also dissipates quicker in the atmosphere. So there's a balancing act there in terms of, in the short term, it has a bigger impact, but in the longer term, it emits, it dissipates quicker. So in a natural farming system, animals still produce that methane, but they produce it at a rate that the atmosphere can cope with it. And in the meantime, animals are living in grassland and they're living in forests, and these are sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, and that's having a balancing impact with the impact that the animals are having on the environment. The problem that we have is that we've developed a farming system where we pack a huge number of animals into small spaces. We feed them on supplements, we feed them on soy, we feed them on barley and corn and grains that we've grown specifically for that purpose. We dig up grasslands, natural grasslands, in order to plant crops for animals to eat, crops for humans to eat as well. Digging up soil in turn releases carbon into the atmosphere. We create industrial fertilizers, which we then put onto our soil, which then strips the soil of its own ability to fertilize itself. It's a whole, the food system, the industrial food system as it stands at the moment is an absolute ticking time bomb of imbalance and of industrial processes that eventually are going to completely destroy our natural ecosystem's ability to feed itself. So that's quite a big complicated argument, explanation I've given you there. Basically, it's very complicated and it's very damaging, and we have to rethink fundamentally all the ways that we grow food. But there's not one simple answer to it. And a lot of climate activists who've been working for a long time in food and sustainable food often butt heads with some more extreme activists, particularly those who want to end animal agriculture or think a fully plant-based diet is the answer, because it's quite, saying we need to stop farming animals is a really simplistic response, and it's not viable in a lot of places. It wouldn't automatically give you the response that you're looking for, and also it's, as I say, my focus and sort of sustainable people coming up from a sustainable agriculture's point of view is we don't need another techno fix to a big mess of techno fixes on top of, we've tried to feed the world by techno fix on top of techno fix on top of techno fix, which has got us in this mess in the first place. But the solution is to look back at the natural systems, the agroecological systems we call them, that have fed us for millennia, and mimic those, figure out how we can mimic those on a large scale, but a scale that's restoring that equilibrium, and restoring the ecosystem's ability to balance itself out. That's where the solution lies, not in simple things like let's end all animal agriculture or let's move to vertical farming straight away, or various different radical solutions that have been proposed.
So what does sustainable agriculture look like to you? I mean, what would, if I don't even know what the right word is, if I was to walk onto a piece of land that was being used for sustainable agriculture, what would I see?
Really, really a diverse landscape, diverse range of animals living there. It is really about diversity and moving away from the one-size-fits-all big agri-tech solutions that have been proposed to us. So I think it's a complicated subject because ecosystems are really complicated things, and when you start to mess around and imbalance them so much, that's where the problem lies. So thinking about it, the other thing is it looks very different in different countries. So there is no global solution for sustainable agriculture. There is a whole network of local solutions to sustainable agriculture, and they vary depending on what your topography is, depending on how much rainfall you get, depending on your temperature and your climate. So for Scotland, 80% of Scotland is only suitable for grazing animals on. So we cannot say let's stop farming animals and use that land to grow protein crops or to grow fruit and vegetables instead, because our soil simply isn't fertile enough. We have a very small amount of soil that's fertile enough for growing fruit and vegetables on, or for grain crops or for arable. So the first thing you do is you use that good land to grow your fruit and vegetables and to grow your arable. In Scotland, you hear a lot about land being wasted, land being used to grow feed for animals, and that's a waste of our resources. In Scotland, actually, the biggest waste of our resources we have is actually the whisky industry. So a huge proportion of our most fertile land, particularly in the northeast of Scotland, grows barley. But it doesn't grow barley for human or animal feed, it grows barley to malt for the whisky industry, which brings in a lot to the Scottish economy, but it doesn't help feed us. It's not meeting our food needs. So you need to really value that good quality land, decide what you're going to do with it. And from our point of view as Greens, that needs to be prioritised for healthy, affordable food that people are going to actually eat. Really good quality fruit and vegetables grown in an organic way, grown for local markets so that people can access it easily. The rest of the land, it's about looking at how best you can use that, sometimes to produce food on, but also other ways that you can use that land as well. People talk a lot about rewilding, and we do support rewilding. We passed a motion at our conference this year to support rewilding. But sustainable land use isn't just about letting it go back to the wild. It's also about, using it for planting trees on in a managed way to support biofuels. It's also about combining animals and trees. It's a process called agroforestry or silvopasture, where you can put these two things on together. Animals have a really, really important role to play in restoring land that's been degraded over time. So by the very active grazing, so cows and sheep and goats as grazing animals, they play a really important role in going in and eating the grass, pooing on the grass, fertilising the grass, but also bringing in other, it's all about ecosystems. It's about not just introducing cows and sheep, but introducing the other animals that live there, introducing the bacteria back into the soil that then helps grow healthy grassland systems that then helps lock carbon down into the soil. It's about combining all these things on the one bit of land. So upland farming in Scotland, if you go out onto a sheep farm, you'll just see huge swathes of empty bare hills with a few sheep on it, which are very, it's unfertile soils. It's meat that we don't even eat in Scotland. Like, so much of our farmland is given over to lamb that then the farmers can't sell because they're only getting £35 a sheep at the moment for a carcass. So it's economically unsustainable. There's so much more potential in our land, but it starts with breaking it down into smaller farm units, looking at what we can do with that land and combining lots of different activities and processes on it.
So Scotland's soils, as I understand, are in a lot of ways heavily depleted, and that's partly, you'll set me right if I'm wrong on this, because the trees, a lot of it was heavily forested historically, like in the Middle Ages and so on. And when the trees go sort of the topsoils, and then so this has this vicious cycle effect that not only, because healthy soils are good carbon stores, carbon sinks. So we've damaged our soils so they don't absorb carbon. We've damaged them so much that you can't grow anything on them. The trees are gone. You can't even grow sheep on a lot of them. And then of course the other wasted land, or rather what I think of as the most wasted land, is all the land that's reserved for shooting estates. So what's so frustrating to me as a green about this is that a lot of that land has been classified as agricultural land, even though it's only used by a few rich people to murder angry birds a few times a year. They get huge EU subsidies for that. They're not providing our food. So how does that all fit into the picture? How do we make our soils, how do we reclaim that land and make our soils healthy again?
Yeah, absolutely. So a fifth of the uplands in Scotland are shooting estates. They're upland grouse. A fifth, yes.
That's massive.
Absolutely huge. It totally is. So like, if you're talking about rewilding, that's where you start, because they're essentially, grouse moors are even worse. They're even more ecologically barren than upland sheep farming, because at least sheep farming, you've got some sheep on it. There's an element of grazing going on there. There's an element of biodiversity. Upland grouse moors are managed in a way that's specifically about limiting the biodiversity of these areas so that you can release a few birds a year out onto the land and let people go and shoot them. So they actively get rid of animals like mountain hares, beautiful protected animals like mountain hares, because they spread diseases that potentially kill the grouse, which is what they're going out to shoot. They burn heather because the heather contains ticks and parasites and things that again damage these grouse. It is an absolute insane way to manage a huge valuable resource. it's a cultural resource, it's an environmental resource. It makes me really angry. I find it really difficult.
And for such a, as I say, I like to think of myself as a sort of normal person. I'm not a posh. I'm not a posh person, is what I didn't grow up thinking shooting animals for fun was normal. And I think maybe if you grow up in the countryside, I don't know. I don't know if this is a country city. So I grew up in a city. You're right. I'm used to getting my food in a packet from the shop. I will confess that I don't know much about sort of farm to plate stuff. that's not been part of my life. But the idea of shooting animals for fun seems so bizarre. Like, it's different, I think, if you're being part of the food chain and eating animals, which many people choose to do. A lot of people these days are opting out from doing that. But, you know, it is something that people choose to do. But shooting animals for fun?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cultural thing. So if you talk to people who go out shooting, and there is, again, there's a difference between, you know, I know people who go out and shoot in a deer management way. So there are different types of hunting, and, you know, deer is a slightly different thing in that our ecosystem is so out of whack in Scotland that we have these animals that if you don't cull deer, they end up overpopulated in an area. You end up with deer starving and things like that. So that's a slightly different
predators,
thing.
Isn't it?
Because there's no predators, exactly.
So we need to reintroduce like wolves and bobcats.
Yeah, we can do, absolutely. But the grouse moor thing, that's a specific hunting practice where it's completely introduced. You know, these animals. Well, actually, no. Sorry, I take that back. Grouse aren't introduced. Grouse are a wild animal in Scotland. Pheasants are introduced. You get pheasants and you get guinea fowl and things like that. Yeah, so pheasants are basically farmed. That's one of the things that we've been looking at in the Scottish Parliament is trying to reclassify pheasants as farmed animals, because pheasants are basically reared on estates. You know, they're reared in like hatcheries and then they're released and then people go and shoot them. It's so easy to shoot a pheasant. Like it's like the absolute entry level shooting. They're totally daft. But the thing is, they're still classed as wild animals, and because they're classed as wild animals, it means you can go and shoot them. If you reclassify them as a farmed animal, you cannot shoot a farmed animal. There's rules and regulations around making sure that you basically have to take a farmed animal to an abattoir to make sure it's killed in a proper way. Okay. So if you reclassify pheasants as farmed animals, that's the industry gone. You can't do shooting parties anymore. Grouse is a bit different. Grouse are wild animals, but they maintain the grouse moors in a way that's absolutely optimal for them. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine, grouse are pretty small birds. They're quite delicate. They do have a lot of natural predators and things, so there's a lot of intervention goes on in order to make an environment where grouse thrive in, so that you can then go and shoot them. So there's a huge amount of raptor persecution goes on in these estates, and we know it, and it's not being pursued and it's not being challenged at the moment. But because you know, eagles, golden eagles, white-tailed eagles and the like go and eat grouse and will capture mature grouse as well as young grouse or whatever, there's estate managers going out at the moment. Have to be careful what I say.
Yeah,
no, there are
dead eagles.
There's a lot of dead eagles. Exactly.
We can't accuse any particular person, but there's a lot of dead eagles showing up near shooting estates.
Exactly. So you asked about what we can do about that. I mean, first of all, you stop. There were changes in 2014 in the latest phase of the Common Agricultural Policy around the amount of money that these could claim, but we could have gone a lot further. Basically, the Scottish Government and the UK Government decided to not introduce voluntary measures, which could have really limited that. But if you declassify shooting estates as agricultural land and you make them less, make sure that they cannot claim any kind of like agricultural or rural support subsidies in general, then it makes them less viable. But there's a real lack of imagination as well in general across the farming and the upland sector. There's a lack of imagination, and there's a lack of really good examples about what you can do with this land, about the alternatives. There's been some really good papers produced and some good, you know, the Revive Coalition have done some good kind of visioning projects around what upland Scotland could look like, combining sustainable food production with housing and forestry and the likes. But it's on paper at the moment. Mm-hmm. What we really need are some visionaries and some sort of local leaders to step forward and to say, I'm going to do this with my land. We're going to really change the way that we use our land. We're going to change the way that we produce food, and we're going to become an example to the rest of Scotland. It's happening on a small scale. There's some really fantastic farmers in various places around Scotland at the moment, wonderful crofters and the Western Isles and the Northern Isles, good examples in Cairngorms National Parks and the like of people doing this on quite a small scale, and they're starting to get together. There's a new organisation called the Nature Friendly Farming Network, which is doing great work to try and promote that. And there is a shift politically in that, and people are more interested in that now. But nobody yet has kind of done it on a big scale for these big estates, these big traditional hunting estates, to say this is what they could look like. So that would be a real game changer if somebody could do that.
That's brilliant. That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
So you've got your first hustings tomorrow for this election?
I do.
How are you feeling about that?
Good. So we don't have any local hustings in Dunfermline. If anyone in Dunfermline's listened to this and wants to organise hustings before the 12th of December, that would be fantastic. So I'm going through to Glasgow. I'm doing the WWF Climate Emergency Hustings at the Scottish Power headquarters, and it's going to be live streamed on the Herald website, I do believe. So it's quite high profile. Looking forward to it. Debating it with 4 middle-aged white men about the climate emergency. So I'm going to try and talk about
a manel. Well done for being the only woman on the
we're
panel.
not doing a manel, but trying to talk to people about the importance of diverse voices in the climate debate. But there are some young people there as well. They've got some young people in the audience, so I'm looking forward to speaking to them and giving them the floor at some point as well. So looking forward to that.
Brilliant. Well, I hope that goes well, and thanks for speaking with me today.
Yeah, I hope that was useful. If anyone's got questions about food and farming policy, please do get in touch, because that was quite a bit of a ramble chat about it. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk to members and stuff about this. So.
And then life talk radio.